Welcome to the second half of Passion. Oh, we have a fun half hour for you now. We're going to talk about BDSM for beginners. And it's fun because I've got a fun guy to talk about this. Frank B. Kermit, you've heard him on the show before. He's from franktalks.com. He's got a whole bunch of books, and he's a self-described bedroom coach. In fact, he'll be appearing on TV coming up on July 27th on Slice TV on a TV show entitled Newlywed Nearly Dead, where he does a little bit of bedroom coaching, and we'll be talking about this. Hey, Frank, welcome back.
How you doing, Dr. Laurie?
It's great. It's always great having you on the program.
It's always great to be here.
I tell you, I don't know how you must spend an awful lot of time you just all over the place there.
There's very little time left over for personal enjoyment.
And congratulations, you've got a little new baby.
Yes, the tadpole was born on June 3rd.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks.
All right, so you have to tell me about this bedroom coaching experience of yours on television, first of all. And this is all about BDSM. So maybe we can actually start with describing what that is exactly. And let's talk about light BDSM. What are we talking? What kinds of things are we talking about for people who don't know the terminology?
Okay, well, for starters, BDSM stands for Bondage Sado-Domination, Sado-Masochism.
Right.
It starts off initially as a play of power. Who's going to be in control and who's going to give up control? When I'm dealing with absolute beginners to the world of BDSM, I try to frame it first as the idea of skin sensation play. The idea that when you're paddling someone, rather than think of it in terms of punishment and reward, at least for beginners, think of it more as an intense massage. Starting there, it makes the experience more pleasurable and also takes into account the comfort levels of the two people involved.
Right. And this obviously requires quite a bit of communication, so I'm sure a lot of the work is first talking about this, right?
Initially, if you're dealing with experienced practitioners, a lot of communication in terms of boundaries, do's and don'ts, what can be said during a quote-unquote scene, what cannot be said. You're looking at really, especially for the person who's giving up a certain amount of control, you want to establish a level of trust there.
Right.
And if you don't trust somebody, don't play with them.
Okay, Frank, let's just say you've got your average couple who's never ventured into this world at all. Maybe one partner has seen, read about it, what have you, and they're thinking, this is something I'd like to try. How do you go about introducing this to your partner?
Well, first of all, you have to gauge whether or not your partner would even be comfortable with it. What I normally recommend, and things that I do myself, is to bring it up in the form of humor. See how the person reacts to that. Here's an example. You're talking about something, and you're getting into a snarky discussion. Somebody makes a joke, and you'll say something like, "Well, if you keep that up, I'm going to have to give you a spanking."
Mm-hmm.
Now, if the person you say that to jokes back and says, "Oh, no, I'm the spanker in this relationship," you know that they have a certain level of comfort just in the fact that they can have a sense of humor about it.
Okay.
If the person turns around and says, "Oh, no, that's disgusting," or "What's wrong with you?" or "You a pervert," or if they have reacted negatively to it, it's probably not going to be something that they're going to want to explore.
So it's not something you'd want to push the envelope with.
There's I can honestly say this through my experience, there's no point in pushing anybody's boundary or trying to get anybody to change their mind about something. There's too many people out there already willing to participate.
Right. Except what if you're in a relationship and you want to spice things up, and that's the idea of one person. I mean, I'm hoping that people have developed, if they're in relationships and long-term relationships, at least a level of intimacy where this kind of thing can be brought up without feeling threatened either.
Exactly. Now, if we're talking about monogamous relationships where you're not going to experiment sexually with anyone else, if you can't even bring it up with your partner, your problem isn't that you need to spice up the relationship. You have a communication problem. That's a fundamental issue.
Right.
And this just becomes a symptom of that problem.
Well, it's interesting because end of last week we talked about a study that looked at what makes great sex in long-term relationships, and it didn't have anything to do with spicing it up. It had to do much more with connection and communication. But it's also in those same couples that are willing to experiment and let themselves go and be a little more adventurous and a little more daring when they had all of those other elements.
Exactly. Unfortunately, not everybody is open to that because some of them have personal issues with their own intimacy. And when they bring it into a relationship, they may be looking for something that they can predict. And when you bring something like BDSM into the environment, it becomes something that is unknown, and that could be terrifying for people.
Right. And it can be terrifying, especially if there's a history of some kind of sexual trauma, right?
Exactly. One of the issues that does come up when I'm talking to people is that one of the couple may have a history of sexual abuse.
Right.
And their partner wants to experiment with some form of BDSM. This might trigger bad memories. Their partners who brought it up may not even know about their sexual past. So there are things that I would suggest to someone who has been sexually abused that would want to experiment with BDSM. Now, the first rule is if you don't want to experiment with it, regardless of the reason, don't do it.
Okay.
If you are willing to try it and you have been sexually abused, I often recommend for the person who has been abused to, for the first experience, play the role of the submissive so that at some point in the quote-unquote scene, from the time you start practicing BDSM to the time you stop, you actually, for the person who has been abused, they go through the process of saying stop. They go through the process of saying, no more, I want to stop it now. This breaks the repeating behavior pattern that they suffered in the past where they didn't have the power to say stop.
Right. So this gives them back control.
Exactly.
Right.
What I've often found is that when someone has been sexually abused and they take on the role of the dominant, although they can go through the scene usually from the beginning to the end, which may or may not include sex at the end of the scene, afterwards they struggle with it because they feel that they're now identifying with their abuser.
Right.
And this causes a lot of feelings of guilt, remorse, anger, resentment at their partner. And this is where I always suggest, well, if you have been abused, take the role of the submissive initially so that you get used to the idea that as a submissive now, since you have the power to stop, this is where you now separate the new sexual experience with your new partner from the abusive past.
Very important to be aware of all these things and how it plays out. But coming up, I want to talk about just for your average couple. I mean, you've been saying the word the scene and all of these things, but does it have to be so elaborate? I want to start with the most basic things that people can do that are pretty much BDSM, but truly for the newbie, the very newbie. So we'll do that coming up with Frank B. Kermit. He's a self-described bedroom coach, but the author of many books. He's been on the show many times before. You can check out his website, franktalks.com, and you'll get a rundown of all his books and other work. So we'll do more of that, and I'd love to hear from you too. If you've got questions, feel free to call in and ask them.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to the emotional needs of women. Ladies, do you want the man in your life to understand you on your level? Do you want your man to be able to listen to and address all of your emotional needs? Show him how much you really want your relationship to be the best it can be. Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test makes the perfect gift. The book, written by a man, for men, is endorsed by every woman that reads it. This book is a guide for men to understand exactly what a woman means when she speaks. Is that worth changing your life forever? Buy this book at franktalks.com now.
Tonight we're talking about BDSM for beginners. Okay, a little kink for the vanilla couple. Vanilla meaning couples who don't engage in this, who kind of, do regular stuff. I'm not even sure how to describe vanilla anymore. But this is, we know that kink has gone mainstream, and some people are curious about just experimenting a little bit, being a little bit adventurous. We've got Frank B. Kermit on the air once again with us from franktalks.com is his website. He's also a self-described bedroom coach. He'll be appearing on a television show on July 27th on Slice TV, a TV show entitled Newlywed Nearly Dead, where he actually coaches a couple in this area. So I figured, hey, he can coach us through all of this too. What's interesting, Frank, is that when people are interested, or they find out they may venture into this world, they'll do an internet search, right?
That's right.
And what are they going to come across if they do BDSM or kink?
They're usually going to come across some free videos of absolute extreme BDSM experiences. This is where somebody might be tied up so tightly that parts of their body start to turn purple because blood flow is not going on.
Oh, great.
They might be on the receiving end of a flogging or a paddling, such that their bodies will turn red and end up bruised. They might be experiencing some element of humiliation, where they're being called names or being told to do things that, essentially that they wouldn't normally be considered to want to do.
Sure.
And these things are very extreme. You have to remember that those type of videos are made for an audience that has already practiced BDSM for years.
Right.
And like anybody who is very skilled at any particular sexual fetish, sexual interest, the beginner stuff, the light paddling, it's akin to getting a massage. When you start going for massages regularly, maybe at the very beginning you want a very gentle massage, and once you get used to that, over the course of a number of years, you want the massage to get more and more intense.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
And the videos that you're watching on the internet are the absolute extreme. Their goal is not to educate. Their goal is to make money, whether it's through shock value or through enticing people with something that may look outrageous.
Right.
But the average person isn't interested in having that type of, sometimes skin-breaking, bleeding, extreme type fetishes.
Well, it scares people away, I think, even from the word itself. The acronym BDSM scares people because when they look that up, that's what they see.
That's right. And BDSM could be as simple as this. And here's something that vanilla couples, absolute beginners, can try to do, which is actually very fun, but doesn't have any of those scary elements. The next time that two people are together and one of them is performing oral sex on the other, the person who's on the receiving end of the oral sex is going to be told, okay, your hands have to hold on to the edge of the bed or at the head mass of the bed, and you're not allowed to let go no matter what. So the oral sex will happen. The person on the receiving end eventually will reach an orgasm, but when they reach an orgasm, no matter how good it feels, no matter what's happening, no matter how they're being stimulated, they may not release their hands from the bed. Their hands don't even have to be tied up or handcuffed.
Right, right.
They simply have to hold on. And because they were given that rule to follow it, because that boundary was set, that's where they're giving up a little bit of the control. So that right after the orgasm, the body's extra sensitive at that point. Perhaps you stimulate, it doesn't even have to be the genitalia. Perhaps you stimulate different parts of the body that keep the sensations going, but the person cannot release their hands from wherever they've been told to hold on to.
So basically it's pushing it to where you establish different boundaries for the sexual act, and you take turns establishing those boundaries, is what I'm getting from you.
Exactly. Now, there are people who will not want to switch. A switch is a person who will at times be a submissive and at times be dominant. They may do that with different people or within the same relationship.
Right.
There are people who don't want to switch. There are people who simply, they don't get any enjoyment from being the submissive, or they don't get any enjoyment from being the dominant.
Right. And maybe we can describe a little bit what it means to be submissive, because it almost sounds like a dirty word.
Well, anytime you deal with sex, you're always going to have people that have issues with it, and any terminology you use is going to be considered a dirty word.
Right.
Words like penis and vagina for some people are considered bad words.
Yes, we say them all the time on this program, yes.
Oh, yeah. Now, here's how I define them. The person who is the dominant is responsible for everything that happens. The person who is the submissive, although they're on the receiving end of the actions, they're the ones in control. Whenever I have played BDSM with someone, I will usually start off by telling them, first of all, you are safe. You're not responsible for what's about to happen, but you're always in control.
I think that's really important.
Very important, because it lets the submissive know, the person who is going to have the actions done to them, that if ever something gets too intense for them, maybe they start feeling pain because they have to maintain a certain position for too long, they have the right to say, okay, stop.
Right.
At which point, they're in control. They're not responsible for what's happening to them in that moment, but they're always in control to say, stop, or go on, I want more.
Okay, and this is important, that these rules, this is what worries me a little bit when couples start to venture into this area, is they don't have all the rules, and I think it's really important. That's why I wanted to talk about it, is there are certain conditions you have to be aware of so that everybody's comfortable.
Exactly. You don't use BDSM as a means to say, well, now that I'm the one who's in control, or now I'm the one who's dominant, I'm going to do something that we didn't discuss just because I have the opportunity to get away with it. It doesn't work that way. And if that's the type of relationship you're in, once again,
Yikes.
This is a symptom of it, not the problem itself.
Right.
One of the other things that I advise couples is that when they play BDSM in the bedroom, they need to make sure that it only stays in that particular space. The person who is going to be the dominant in the bedroom doesn't necessarily going to be the person who has to be the dominant person at dinner in a restaurant.
Right. So you don't want, even though in the bedroom it's safe to boss the other one around, so to speak, outside of the bedroom, you're not going to continue that and start bossing your partner around just because it's fun in the bedroom.
Exactly. One of the things I recommend is a certain type of mood lighting. Maybe you plug in a couple of lava lamps. Maybe you turn on the regular lights and you turn on only red light bulbs. You turn on a certain type of music that you don't play at any other time. The idea is to create an environment where, within this environment, this is the way we're going to behave.
And that's okay.
And that's okay, but we don't take these behavior patterns into other areas of our lives.
Right. Coming up, I will ask you about BDSM clubs, because Montreal is full of them. There's quite a few of them, and kink parties, BDSM parties, scenes, roleplay, like all kinds of things going on here. So we'll talk about going to one of those and how safe that might feel for couples. That's coming up with my guest, Frank B. Kermit. You can check out his website at franktalks.com as well if you've got questions about BDSM for beginners.
From Loser to Seducer is the story of Frank B. Kermit. This book marks the triumph of a nice guy over most of his inner demons. This includes going from being a loser to managing 5 lovers at the same time, his first Valentine's date with 2 women at the same time, and getting back the one that got away. Want to learn how you can change your life? Buy this book at franktalks.com.
My guest is Frank B. Kermit of franktalks.com, the author of numerous books, also a self-described bedroom coach. Will be appearing on television on July 27th on a show, The Newlywed Nearly Dead, and he is he's bedroom coaching on that one, talking about introducing BDSM. Is it wise, Frank, if you're curious about this or are thinking about introducing this, to go to a club?
Probably not initially.
Okay.
However, if you're an adventurous couple and you're going there with the understanding that you're going to go there as voyeurs and not necessarily participate, it can be a safe thing to do. The first time that I went to a BDSM club, it was a fetish club in Montreal, actually. It was Valentine's Day. I ended up alone, and I figured, okay, well, I'm just going to go ahead and go there. I called them up. I said, what's the dress code? They said, wear black if you don't have any...
latex?
Exactly. And if you have toys to bring, you can bring a couple of toys, but, like a flogger or a paddle of some sort. But at the very least, you must wear all black. So I went down there, paid my money, and I figured, okay, I'm just putting myself out there, let's see what happens. And nothing really happened. I was approached by a couple of people just to get into conversation. I didn't meet anybody that I really wanted to participate with, just because I didn't know anybody there. I really didn't know who I could trust.
Right.
And I just sat back and I just watched people interact. And there were people who obviously had some form of relationship going on. There were people who, just met and decided to use one of the pieces of equipment there where they could be tied up, tied down, have things done to them. It was really just an interesting experience to just see people participate in this and then to talk to them afterwards.
Right.
To just figure out, okay, what's their kink, what's going on inside their head, and were they actually okay with everything that was happening to them?
So you did a field study.
Very much so. Very much
Well,
so.
you never stop working, even in fun. I want to talk about one aspect that worries me a little bit, and we talked about this with David Carradine's death. Practicing autoerotic asphyxiation, which is bondage in a certain way. They found him bound, basically. And I think it's important that when we talk about bondage that people tread carefully, too. There must be certain things that shouldn't be bound and where you completely feel safe.
When you're talking with beginners, one of the first rules I have is you never bind someone down to the point where they couldn't get out themselves. And you never make it impossible for them to communicate that there's something wrong.
So gagging is a no-no.
If you're going to gag somebody, their hands need to be free so they can remove the gag if necessary.
Okay.
If you're going to...
blindfold?
Blindfolds are okay, but if you're going to blindfold somebody and gag them and tie their hands down...
No way.
That's a bad thing.
Okay.
And I wouldn't even suggest that for people who are regular practitioners, unless you're with someone that's known you for years, that you completely trust. It could be something as simple as your hands are tied, you're blindfolded, and you're gagged, and you're having an asthma attack.
Oh, my goodness.
And the person who's done this to you isn't even in the room. This happened with somebody I know. I interviewed him for one of my podcasts, and it was just a horrible experience for him.
Wow. He could have died.
Yes, that's right. So when I talk to couples and I say, okay, if you're going to start out, the illusion of being tied up sometimes is more than enough to get the thrill for it.
Right.
So I often recommend that you use, let's say, a soft material like a bathrobe belt.
Or a silk scarf.
Exactly. You tie it in a loop, you fit your hand in, but it should be loose enough that if and I always use the example, what if somebody walked into the door? Would you be able to get your hand out of that noose just so that you could cover yourself up? And if you can get your hand out, you're doing okay.
Frank, it's not an image little Johnny wants to see.
Oh, never mind the kids. I mean, you're dealing with parents. You're dealing with roommates.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, Frank, unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for being with me again tonight.
Dr. Laurie, it's always a pleasure. I look forward to being on the show in the future.
Absolutely. We'll have you on again soon. Thanks so much. You can find out more about Frank by going to franktalks.com. That's Frank, F-R-A-N-K, talks.com. And you can find out all about his books. And this segment will be on his website as well. We got to say goodnight. Tina Lullum, thank you so much for keeping me on track here and keeping the show rolling as well as it does. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the night, and please remember, life is short, so do take the time to smell the flowers and indulge your passions.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the Adult Male Virgin Seminars and Telephone Consultations. If you are an adult and want to get a handle on this once and for all, you need this seminar. Being an adult male virgin can be most stigmatizing in today's society. You feel like a failure in the eyes of the mass culture around you, alienated from your male friends who all talk about their sexual conquests, and you must hide this shameful secret lest they use it against you. And the very personal pain, anguish, and despair that cannot be described by words that haunts you every moment of your life. Enough is enough. It is time for male virgins to take charge of their sex lives. Frank gives you the rules of winning in this seminar. The Adult Male Virgin Seminars and Telephone Consultations. Make your first time the best time of her life. Only available at franktalks.com. Frank helps adult boys turn into men.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the book, I'm a Man, That's My Job, The Philosophy of a Seducer. Ladies, have you ever wondered where all the real men have gone? Do you turn to your women friends because you cannot find a true man in your life? Do you want the man in your life to step up and know what it means to be a man that can make you feel like the woman that you are? Are you tired of mothering the men you date? Give these boys the gift of manhood. The book, I'm a Man, That's My Job, teaches men to create their own seduction persona, personal inner game, and how to take the lead in a relationship. Buy this book now at franktalks.com.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the program Dating Younger Women, a guide for older men to the emotional needs of loving younger women. Frank brings good news to the older seducer, to women they possess higher value. Frank's lecture reviews the stigmas associated with older men dating younger women and their solutions. Key emotional needs for both women and men in the age difference. Methods of approaching younger women. And several answers to questions posed by older members of the audience. He also very much covered marriage between an older man and a younger woman. When dealing with a little girl inside, a man must be able to distinguish those women who wish to compensate losses in a father figure from those who are seeking and capable of an authentic relationship. Frank adds advice on where you can meet younger women, as well as dealing with the competition. Life gets better. All in all, a confidence-refreshing lecture for men concerned about their erotic viability over the hill. Dating Younger Women, a guide for older men to the emotional needs of loving younger women. Buy this program now at franktalks.com.